Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I am delighted to be back up the road, and I'm joined today by Chris McElwain and Jim Orr. And a welcome return to the first team squad, to James French, who I am sure will be talking a wee bit about Liam Scales, because James told us early doors that he was a player. And if you get it right once, Chris, you can run for months and months with that, mate.
As we do.
As we absolutely do. Before we do anything, big shout out, a big thank you to Quinny and Chris yesterday for basically running the show when I was on my way down to the Big Smoke. Guys, I don't know about you. I'm a country bumpkin. I'm not a good traveller. I need a companion to tell me where to go, where to stand, all that kind of stuff. But I'm back up the road now, and I just wanted to say thank you to every single person out there who supports the Celtic State of Mind in any way, shape or form. Your votes got us into the final last night. We were down at the Spurs Stadium, and I've got to say there was mixed emotions walking around the Spurs Stadium. I don't know if you've ever been, but there are massive, I'm not even going to say life size, like huge big banners at Ange everywhere you look, and you're just looking at the big man and you're thinking to yourself, you could have been a contender, mate. You could have been a contender. We get into the stadium. I shared a wee bit of footage on the socials. Unbelievable stadium. I don't know what the atmosphere's like, but what a stadium. And we go in, and we're in the finalist of two different categories, one of which we were up against Fabrizio Romano, so I kind of scored that one off the list. But we did win Best International Podcast, so thank you to all the contributors, everybody who watches, everybody who voted. It's massive. I mean, you're in a room with Sky Sports, The Overlap, The Athletic, Fabrizio Romano, all these guys in the final, and Acsom were in there, and we won another award. So thank you, every single one of you. It's huge. It's huge for a channel because we're independent. We don't have any backers, no financial backing from a big media company. We do it all ourselves. We're always looking to improve, and there's going to be improvements to the daily live stream as well. This is going to stay here, 12:30. Set your watch by it. We'll be here no matter what. And a big thank you to everybody involved. I don't want to go in too deep, but it was tremendous, and I accepted that award for everybody who subscribes to the channel, listens to us on any format. Thank you all very, very much. But Chris, cheers for stepping in. Was it all right with Quinny yesterday? He's a good lad, Quinny, isn't he?
He makes it easy, to be honest. I mean, yeah, I just kind of mumble and fudge my way through it, and appreciate everybody that kind of sticks with it when I'm hosting. I know there's probably a few that drop out when I'm on, but I do appreciate it. But can I just say, I mean, I know everybody will extend it, but yeah, congratulations on the award. I mean, I said, me and Quinny were discussing yesterday the challenges around this type of content creation, how long it takes to build up, and I think when you consider, when you started this, it was yourself and I think Kev around a kitchen table, and where it's got to now, the amount of work, the amount of sacrifice, and we've spoken about it before, how frustrating it must be for Mrs. Dykes to with the amount of hours that you've spent putting into this, and it's been a real sacrifice, but to see it paying off as you did yesterday. And on a day when everybody's crying about the new, over the new Celtic Christmas video, and then you go and post that acceptance speech, and it just sets us all off again. I mean, it was like somebody was chopping onions all the way through this house yesterday. That's all I can say.
The thing, football does that to you. I'm going to come to Jim because Jim is he's of a different era, a different vintage to most of us, but he brings a real balance to a Celtic State of mind.
Jim, he's calling you old, mate. He's calling you old.
I never once used that word. I never once used the word old. I said vintage.
That old bloke, all right. Fair
vintage. Aging like a fine wine, Jim.
Keep digging.
And what I think is important is community. I think community is so important, because if you've got that, you can overcome just about anything. And I think that Celtic is a community, and I think Acsom's built a smaller community of Celtic-minded fans. And that basically drive from the hotel to the venue. I'm sitting in the car, and I'm not big-headed enough to think I'm going to win an award. It wasn't my award. It was a Celtic State of Mind's award. But I thought to myself, if I need to go up and get this, I better have something prepared, something. And I didn't have a speech, and I just remembered, and I shared it with you guys before, Finbar, someone who does tune in, someone who I've met in person. Finbar sent me that email, and it blew me away, absolutely blew me away, because, Jim, it's about community, and it's about, the emotional effect to Celtic on so many people. But the fact that people actually tune in every single day, there's so many of them. You see their names, you see the avatars tuning in every day, and it just humbles me every time I consider it.
I think for those who hadn't heard it, what did you read it out?
Yeah, I could bring it up for anyone who's not seen it. This was the acceptance speech because, I think most people go up and they're a bit surprised because you don't get told in advance. I always wondered about that with the Brits and all that. Do these people know they're going to win? I'm still a wee bit undecided on that one. But you go in blind, you don't know if you're going to win. And I basically read this out. I thought I would drop you a line to say thank you. We do get a lot of emails, I've got to say this, and a lot of DMs. And, there are some out there who I haven't yet responded to, and I'll respond to everybody. But this message went on the 7th of May. My beautiful wife of 40 years passed away in tragic circumstances. As you can imagine, this past couple of months I've not been very good. Sleeping at what could be called normal hours isn't there yet. So in the wee small hours when I am feeling low, I listen to Acsom. You and your fellow presenters have been a great help talking all things Celtic. You take my mind off things for a while. If you could pass on my sincere thanks to everyone concerned and tell them that without Acsom, it would be a bit harder. And that was basically the acceptance speech to make everyone realise this is not about trying to make money off Celtic fans. It's not about, creating conflict with anybody to try and get clicks or clickbait or any of that nonsense. It's just about community. It's just about Celtic fans being in this wee hub, escaping for an hour and talking all things Celtic. And it gives me a great delight every day to be able to do it. And it's brilliant to hear that people enjoy it as well. And there's a new generation coming through all the time. We've had people like Amy Canavan, Declan McConville, James McKenzie, still part of the team. And James French is part of a new era of up-and-coming media faces, voices. James, welcome back to the show. You've not been on for a while, mate, but give us a wee update on how Liam Scales is getting on.
Yeah, it's been great. It's great to come back on after a longer kind of than one hiatus. But obviously Liam over international break, kind of a regular now in the Ireland team. Kind of a key cog of the new era with Ireland, with our new manager, Heimer Hallgrimsson, former Iceland manager, of course, who knocked out England at the Euros, obviously, a couple of years ago. But listen, he's been, over the last international break, was kind of up and down for us. Obviously, beat Finland 1-0, and he played the full 90 minutes in that. And then we go to Wembley, daunting task against England, and he gets sent off, and we lose 5-0. So it was kind of up and down for him from a personal point of view. But in terms of Liam over the last year and a half, I know anyone who listens to or has listened to me on Acsom will be sick of me talking about him. But over the last year and a half, Liam has been, I think he's probably playing in the peak of his career. I think last season, maybe near the end of the season, people kind of got on his back about some of his performances might have dropped off, maybe due to a lack of competition, which was probably fair enough. But I think the last year has seen him obviously playing Champions League football again, playing at the highest level for Ireland as well, playing games against France away, Holland away. Like he's really playing at a level where he's never really played before, and I think he's really kind of got accustomed to that and accustomed to the demands of Celtic winning every week. And I think that's kind of seen him even up his development even more. And obviously over the last run of games for Celtic, he's seen himself come out with the team. Kind of unlucky, but also trusty has been really, really good. And they're obviously different players, different strengths, but like with the Celtics run of fixtures, like I'm sure he'll obviously get some more games in the team. And listen, it's been a brilliant year for Liam, and hopefully it can continue into 2025.
The big thing is you've actually only got an involvement in an Ireland podcast, so you can speak about Liam Scales more frequently, James. Your secret's out, mate. But I think as fans, though, Chris, you look at. I'm constantly looking at the appearances of a player like Callum McGregor, and it blows you away when you look at the average amount of appearances he makes in a season. But we probably need to get away from that kind of attitude towards players and think, there's no shame in a player like Liam Scales maybe playing 30 games in a season for Celtic, because you've got Trusty, you've got Carter Vickers, and there's further backup behind that as well. In his first season, under Brendan Rodgers, that is, he basically was an ever-present. But as I said before, there's no shame in him being one of three people who are picked week in, week out.
Yeah, I think when you look back at last season, Liam Scales was in that position initially through necessity, because there simply wasn't another option. They are certainly not another option that the manager had the same level of trust in. When you're looking at this season, and I think we've now got a good problem which we haven't had for a long time, which is that we've got decent strength and depth at the back, and Liam Scales, I think, is part of that trifecta of first choice centre backs. Now, because it's it's 3 people for 2 positions, they're not all going to play week in, week out. But we know about Carter Vickers' injury history, and he's a player I think we have to manage in terms of appearances, like you spoke about. But Trusty and Scales, to an extent, will fall into that as well. What we want is players that for every given game, whether it be domestic, league, cup competitions, going into Europe, etc., we're going to need that level of depth. And this season, Scales is no longer there through necessity. He's there through merit. He's earned the right to be part of that first choice, centre-back trio. I think it would be nice to have at least one other. I always think you should have 2 partnerships ready to go for that position, because it's such a core position within the spine of the team. But at the moment, I think we are confident we've got the 3 best centre-backs we could have at this point in time at that club and available. So really, really pleased for Liam. Delighted to see Trusty coming in and looking like he's certainly been value for money so far. And Carter Vickers, I mean, it's a no-brainer. When he plays, I think everybody around him plays with a greater degree of comfort. So, yeah, hopefully we can keep all 3 of them fit. Maybe we'll get another addition coming in, or maybe somebody coming up from the youth across January. But it's a nice problem to have, right?
Well, the big thing that's been happening today, of course, is the Celtic AGM, which has been covered live on various different sources. And I've been having a look at that since I got home from the big smoke. London back to the wilds of Fife, all right? And I've been having a look at that. And I think what we can do is probably jump in and out of some of the discussion points, because some of them are covered in the AGM. Things like the ticketing issue away from home, the allocation, what's happening with Rangers games. But also, redeveloping the main stand at Celtic Park to ensure that more Celtic fans get into the games. There's chat around Barrafield, there's been chat around the women's team, and there was also chat around things like youth development. You were talking about there, a player coming through the ranks, for example, Chris, and Brennan Rodgers was spoken to about that today. I thought he gave a great answer in the fact that, his bread and butter was working with youth players. He came through, he worked with youth players for 15 years. He knows all about development. And it's interesting, Jim, that he pinpointed James Forrest, Callum McGregor and Tony Ralston as setting the culture at Celtic. I think it's key to have a core of homegrown players. I know it's a traditional way to look at Celtic, Jim, but I still think in the modern day, it's something that's a necessity.
Yeah, I'm just Googling trifecta. Hold on. Sorry. So, you always want young guys coming through the system. It's becoming more and more difficult now because the way football has went, and you go back 40 years, the centenary season, when about that time, most of the players are Scottish, most of the players in all the team are Scottish. So it was much easier back then that there was a hard core of virtually everyone was a Celtic fan. So, you need to know the culture, because I read something during the week about the team across the city are looking to bring in a few ex-players to try and do exactly that. So, you do need that. It's just becoming harder and harder for them to get in. So Daniel Cummings is training with the first team. So, I think he's Scottish, is he? Says he not knowing the answer to that question. Is he Scottish?
I thought he was Scottish until the other day, and someone told me that he was from Ardoyne. So I'm currently typing in Daniel Cummings' nationality to see where he is based. Let's have a wee look.
He was playing for the Scotland under-19s, I think. So he's declared for Scotland anyway.
Yeah. Under-19s, Jim.
But Ardoyne, no.
Well, Francis Turley, and Paddy Lavery. I mean, all the famous.
I was going to say there's a few commentators. Yeah, there's a few commentators from that point.
That'd be good. I mean, it's always dead exciting when a young guy breaks into the team, particularly centre forward, because we've not had a out-and-out centre forward for a long, long time going through the ranks. Who's the last one, Paul? Jerry Craney? Is that you would say that?
I always give Jerry Craney some credit because he scored goals. I think to myself, right, what's your What's your cut-off point? Is it appearances or goals? Who was the last youth product to score 50 or more goals for Celtic? So you're probably then looking at the likes of Sean Maloney, because he would have scored over 50 goals. But he wasn't an out-and-out striker.
No, it was Sid. How many goals
Simon Gunner. Yeah, I would need to check, but I would say he hit 50.
I'd have
Simon
thought so.
Donnelly, 50
Yeah.
goals. But again, he played a lot of his career on the right-hand side, just in front of Jackie. I think the last striker we produced that scored goals for the club 50 plus would be Jerry Craney. And before him, it would be Charlie Nicholas, probably, Jim.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, to answer the question, yeah, we do need those kind of players at the club. They're becoming few and far between. It's just the way modern football is going. James disappeared.
James has disappeared, but he will be back. I found it interesting because, of course, Daniel Cummings is a player that we've been focusing on over the last few weeks because it came to light that, unfortunately, he has not yet been offered a new contract. And as of the 1st of January, players are free to speak within the last 6 months of their contract to other clubs. The vultures are already circling. We've seen players in the recent past leaving under a similar kind of circumstance. So Daniel Kelly and Rocco Vata being the two main ones. And we've also lost guys like Ben Doak in the recent past. So it's one of these issues, but I think the answer that Brendan gave shows that, he knows the issues there, James. He knows that there are players coming through. And it's more of a legacy issue. Brendan's just been back in the door, and not even for 18 months yet. It's going to take a lot longer for us to fix that. And I think the fact that Paul Tisdale's in, youth development is going to be one of his main areas to look at and review. It's going to take a wee while before we get it right, because these are issues that have been inherited in many ways by Brendan Rodgers, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I think youth development's been probably something that the club has neglected over the last number of years. I know a lot of those guys, Rocco Vata, Daniel Kelly, they probably get kind of narrative is that they've took the bigger money and went to England. But if you put yourself in their shoes, is Rocco Vata going to get minutes over the likes of Kyogo or Adam Ida? Is there a pathway for him at the club? Probably not. So that's kind of the reasons why they have moved on. And I think it kind of comes down to it's obviously partly the fans' fault, but also the club's fault. The culture at Celtic is so bent on winning, which is fair enough. We're a huge club, we need to be winning, but I think maybe we have neglected the academy side of the club over the last number of years. And Rodgers, as you said, he came up as a youth coach. He'll definitely want to kind of bring that culture back of bringing through our best talent, showing that there is a pathway there, and integrating them into the first team. And hopefully kind of Daniel Cummings will be the enigma. He'll be the first one to really kind of get his chance in the first team. I'm not saying starting 90 minutes, but even coming on the last 20 minutes when we're 4-0 up, 5-0 up at home to Dundee or something. In situations like that, we should be giving these youth guys a chance. And Daniel's obviously someone I think he scored something like 20 goals in 16 games. He scored 4 goals in 4 games in the UEFA Youth League, which is the highest level of competition he's going to be able to play at. So he really should be integrated into the first team, which he has been, and hopefully he will get opportunities over the coming weeks, because as you said, hopefully I was an issue raised at the AGM that youth development needs to be prioritised, because we just even excluding Ben Doak, because he was obviously kind of always going to leave to Liverpool, considering the money, considering it is Liverpool. But even the likes of Rocco Vata and Daniel Kelly, it was really disappointing to lose guys of their potential and quality, and hopefully that can be kind of a situation that's avoided in the future.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think, I've got the confidence that we've got the right man in charge to identify it. A couple of wee things from last night, I'll probably dip in and out as they come to mind. As I walked up to get the award, somebody shouted, "We like you better than Rangers." So I just popped into my head there. Very much, it might have been. It might have been. I think you might be able to hear my wife in the video, actually. But it very much is a London-centric event, because obviously a lot of the big hitters down there are involved. But it was a nice wee shout anyway. But I was sitting at a table actually with official representatives of Luton Town FC, and the fella sitting to my left, all he wanted to talk about was how good Cameron Carter-Vickers was when he was on loan at Luton. So it's interesting how you look at almost a nomadic experience for Carter-Vickers, Chris, and you don't really know the impact that he's had at some of these clubs that he's spent time at. So obviously these guys, they were down representing Luton. And this is another thing I've noticed over the years. A lot of the clubs are really buying into this award ceremony, and they're sending representation for their own media team. And Luton Town, Man City, Burnley, there was a lot of teams down there. And that's all he wanted to talk about was Carter-Vickers. So he's obviously made a huge impression down there as well. And what I said to him is he's a hero up here, but we've got some concerns about the injury problems. But
Yeah.
again, it looks as though he's been managed. He's been managed really well by Brendan Rodgers when it comes to game time.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's so important that we do that because he is such an important part of the team. I think even as fans, and you sort of see it reflected on the park with the players as well. There's just a greater level of assurance when he's in the team. I mean, no disrespect to Liam Scales, who we've been talking about, or Trusty, even at this early stage, but with Carter Vickers, there's a presence there that's not just his movement and his positional play. It's just a presence where you think, he's the calm head at the back, and when the chips are down, he's one of the guys that you rely on to elevate the players around him. And we spoke a little bit about a few players yesterday and the impact they have, and players like Callum McGregor and the leadership that he brings, and even though he's getting in advanced years, he still brings that element to the table. But one of the things I think is great about this current team is we're starting to get leaders throughout the side. From Kasper Schmeichel, you've got Carter Vickers, you've got Alistair Johnson who's just signed a new deal. I'm sure we'll touch on that. You've obviously got Calmac. So you're starting to get leaders on the park that even though they're not wearing the armband, they're bringing those elements to the those attributes to the table, which I think is great. And it's interesting, you talk about Carter Vickers and his journey up here. A friend of my daughter's, he's from a family down in Milton Keynes, and he spoke about Matt O'Reilly in similar terms. Knew he was going to be a fabulous player, and sure enough, looks like he's just going to continue, being a top player for Brighton. And we were fortunate enough to have him with us for a few years. And similarly, he was also a bit of a Spurs fan, so he knew about Carter Vickers and his time. There's a chap I work with that's a Blades fan, and he said Trusty was a victim of not necessarily playing in a successful side, and it was just his form when he was there was symptomatic, but there were signs that he had a lot more potential, and his ability wasn't really reflected by the results that team was having at the time. So yeah, sometimes I think it's good to get that insight from fans of other team or representatives of other teams, where you can really get more of a view. There's too much of a tendency for us to look at YouTube highlights packages now, where everybody looks like the next coming of Messi or the next Baggio, and suddenly, they just don't fit for whatever reason into what we need for our teams. So I think having that insight is really important.
It is absolutely key. Now, yesterday, I know, Jim, that the guys were talking about the situation at Dumbarton. I want to come to you because you're a student of the Scottish game. You might not want to take that accolade, but
Keep digging. Yeah, it's okay.
You've known all about the Scottish game for decades before us.
Keep digging. You're not making any better. Keep digging. Just give me a shout, hit metal.
Obviously, we've got a situation at the moment which Quinny, I mean, hats off to Quinny, the work he's doing in and around what's going on at Dumbarton. I mentioned it earlier on this week in relation to the fact that we should not be in a situation, Scottish football shouldn't be in a situation where a club is facing this kind of situation financially. It should be something that can be advised to the authorities in advance and dealt with. And I don't think we're dealing with it that way. I don't think we ever have done in Scottish football. But the links between Dumbarton and Celtic, you think about the Lisbon Lions. Straight off the bat, assistant manager Sean Fallon went on to manage Dumbarton. We know about the Johan Cruyff story, which is like a bedtime story for anyone from that area.
Yeah,
and
Bertie,
obviously, Bertie, Willie Wallace, Stevie Chalmers, and of course Charlie Gallagher all play for Dumbarton. And your pal Murdo McLeod, we signed him from Dumbarton as well. How do you feel as a massive supporter of Scottish football, Jim, when you're looking at these clubs, provincial clubs who have offered so much to the Scottish game, and they're in dire straits?
Yeah, I think there's a number of issues there you can unpick. In terms of the stewardship of the Scottish game, it's pretty much non-existent. You can do what you want. Basically, anyone can wander in and do their own thing. And yeah, hats off to Quinny. Anyone who wants to get involved in trying to resurrect a club, my admiration, must be a very exciting thing to do. And then yesterday something pops up about investigations of fraud and whatever. You think, oh dear, here we go again.
Yeah.
I think it's important for clubs to find their level. You've talked about that before. We've talked about that before about we're a small country of 5 million people. We've got 40 clubs. That's too many. Maybe 1 or 2 leagues and the rest we go regional or whatever. Would Dumbarton be part of those 1 or 2? Dumbarton's a fair-sized town. Back in the day they were in the top flight. So Yeah, I mean, I like to see Scottish clubs do well, get good crowds, because it's all good for the game. And the Dumbartons of this world, those are the teams that have got young Scottish players from them. And we talked about pathways earlier. Pathways a bit of a misnomer. I have no idea how a pathway actually works. And I'm a big fan of signing younger players from other Scottish clubs that are doing well. Obviously, Lennon Miller is flavour of the month just now. But if there's a Lennon Miller playing for Dumbarton, would anyone look at him? Because they should be looking at him, I think. Because there's a lot of talent in Scotland, but they're playing in lower divisions because they can't get a sniff of what's happened in the top league. And that's where I think this pathway doesn't really exist anyway. Because if you're playing for the top clubs, you have to win games of football. And if you're somebody like, I don't know, pick somebody at random, Odin Holm. What's Odin Holm's pathway? You spent a lot of money on the guy.
He's in limbo, isn't he?
He's in limbo, pathway limbo. So basically, how do you get him a game? Never mind, how do you get a young 17, 18-year-old guy a game? So I think it's quite difficult at the bigger clubs. But I'd like to see us still signing younger players from other Scottish clubs. You talk about Daniel Cummings. Now, he plays at a level where I don't think it's that great a level, but I always kind of feel with a striker, if you're a striker and you've got a nose for goal at any level, and you put yourself in a position where you've got better players making more chances for you, chances are you'll do quite well. But going back to the Dumbarton thing, I hope they survive. I hope Inverness survive. I hope they all survive and they get stronger. And they put their faith in youth football and they try and attract more people onto the games. And because that's what we need in this country. If Celtic are going to stay in this country, we need other teams to be better. Otherwise, it's too easy. And although it's great, you win the league after league after league, it becomes too easy. And we get into Europe and we get found out, although we've not got found out this season yet. So, yeah, the Dumbarton thing, I hope they do well. I hope they survive and I hope they go from strength to strength. And I hope Quinny does really well and wish him all the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Echo those views as well. I mean, one of the good examples, I think, was Luke McCowan, who played championship football until 2 seasons ago. Part-time footballer, and he changed his position and he's so effective at Dundee, comes up, makes that step up, shows that he can make that step up at that level, and Brendan Rodgers signs him and he's now living a dream for Celtic. So absolutely, I think there is talent. One thing that I've noticed, talking to like friends who have got kids who have been part of an academy system, and you might meet up with them, how's such and such doing? Oh, they're not playing anymore. And they're like 16, 17-year-old. And they're already disillusioned. It's almost as if because they're out the academy system, they're on the scrap heap. Whereas back in our day, right, you still thought you could make it at 20,
it's our day now, is it? It's our day now.
I was speaking to Chris. Sorry,
just to clarify that. Okay,
there was a lot of players came into the game fairly late. Fairly late. We've lost so many young, talented footballers to the game because of
football needs a real revamp, and we say this every year virtually. So revamping to what I think the academy system has failed miserably. Talk to anyone, as you say, who's got kids in the academy, they'll have nothing but 95% of nothing but bad things to say about it. So that whole thing needs a big revamp. Football facilities. Oh, it's rant time. Sorry, 12:59. Football facilities in Scotland need to be looked at as well. We need loads of people playing football. I go to Tory Glen, fantastic facility over the road there. Must have had 12 dozen, maybe 15, 16 pitches lie empty every day of the week. Get the schools in there during the day. But understandably, schools head teachers are pretty risk averse, don't want to take kids out of school. But the facilities are actually there. Use them. Find a way to use them.
Yeah, another big thing, of course, it needs to be joined up. I hate using that term, but you know what I mean. With regards to the SFA, with people coming through with their badges, part of that learning regime has to be that you are the coach, Jim, taking these kids for games of football. Doesn't it always have to be so structured that you're getting into just give them a game of football? How do they do it over in Ireland, James? What's the situation over there in terms of developing youngsters?
Yeah, firstly, kind of just in terms of like Celtic, I know I was talking about Celtic and youth development, like a football team it's kind of shaped by its environment, and Celtic are kind of shaped by Scottish football's environment, if you get me. Yeah. In terms of like Celtic aren't alone in not playing new players, like the likes of Dundee, or maybe not Dundee because they're actually quite good at it, but the likes of St. Johnstone, the smaller sides in the SPL, they're not exactly developing young players either. And if them sides with lower budgets aren't even playing young Scottish players, the chances that these guys are going to be playing for Celtic and Rangers obviously are quite low, if you get me. So it's a real worry from a Scottish fan point of view in terms of the national team and stuff, like the minimum minutes that young players are getting. And I think it probably comes down to kind of the league system, as Jim said. Like, if you look at other nations with similar levels of national teams, similar quality of leagues, the likes of Netherlands, Portugal, Norway, kind of any of those leagues, it's a two-tier system, and it's a lot of the teams are more focused on developing their own youth players instead of kind of just trying to survive. That's why I think a lot of people have touched on going away from the 12 league system in Scotland, because a lot of the teams are so focused on surviving that they rarely do give a chance to their youth players. So I think there definitely needs to be a change in the coming years. I don't know whether it's going to happen, but I think for the future of young players in Scotland, it has to happen for those guys to get a chance. But with regards to Ireland, I think the level of the Irish League is obviously getting better every year, but it's still kind of off the Scottish League. And I think that kind of helps us because the budgets aren't there to bring in guys from overseas. So the Irish teams are forced to really play their young academy players. And as well as that, with Brexit, Irish players aren't allowed to leave Ireland until they're 18. So whereas years ago, English teams would have swooped in when Irish players were 14, 15 and they'd be shipped off to Man United or whatever, now they have to stay till 18. So the responsibility is on Irish teams to develop them and play them. So that's the kind of the difference in the two, as you said. But even in Ireland, like the facilities compared to Scotland is night and day. I know Jim touched on facilities. Like even the stadium, St. Mirren Stadium, is probably better than or as good as the best stadium in Ireland, which would be Shamrock Rovers, Tallaght Stadium. So I think the facilities is still night and day with Ireland and Scotland. Scotland is miles ahead. I think it's just it's just kind of getting the structure right, and I think a changing of the leagues would probably benefit Scottish football, and I think that's a point a lot of people have talked about.
Yeah, you're talking there about kind of stepping up in the standards and all this. A lot of that was discussed today at the AGM. We're looking at the facilities at Barrafield, for example. Eleanor Sadiku spoke about how great that is for the women's team. That's also going to benefit the up-and-coming players. And there was that big discussion point that we have spoken about so many times, Chris, before we get onto the Christmas adverts, so get your hankies ready. We've spoken so many times about the redevelopment at Celtic Park, and not so much the around about the footprint of Celtic Park, because we talk about museums and hotels, etc. But the main stand, that's coming into focus now because things are going so well. We've got money in the bank. You're looking at sold out games against Rangers, Champions League games, and various other games during the season. Massive waiting list, no way of swapping your ticket. And all these things were discussed today. And I found it really interesting, actually, that Michael Nicholson was talking about the expansion of the main stand. He says it's something that they're constantly discussing. But I found it interesting that he said it probably won't be looked at seriously until we're playing in the English Premiership. Listen, that's not a direct quote. That's not verbatim. He's probably said something along the lines of, if we were playing in the English Premier League, it would be more of a realistic target. But that's something we've spoken about on here as well, Chris. The fact that 2 or 3 seasons down the line, the impact of anything, even like a manager leaving, can then impact the attendances. We saw it under Ronnie Dyler, a manager I've got a lot of time for. But, by season 2, we weren't selling tickets like we are now. And I think we're very risk-averse when it comes to things like this. And that came across in the AGM today. I'm not criticising them for it. They gave us a wee bit more information on it, didn't they?
Yeah, I've not seen the full transcript yet, but some of the key points you touched on there. Before I get to that, I just want to jump to the defence of Jim here. Jim, I think out of the 4 of us, you're the only one still playing competitive football, right? So,
Amma, there you go. There you kids these days. What can you
absolutely.
do?
Well, absolutely, Jim. I was always taught to respect my elders, mate. So that's why I'm
keep digging. Keep digging.
You're doing so well, Chris. You're doing so well.
I know. I had him on side there just to look him down. No, look, back to your point. Listen, I wouldn't be as informed about the current condition of Celtic Park as say someone like Jim, who's a season ticket holder. I'm desperately trying to get my season ticket back since giving it up before moving to London a few years back. But certainly I've been there recently with tours and things like that. And the stadium, it's still got a presence. It's still magnificent. But when you consider when the stand was built and when we, Celtic Park as we know it now was first, first exposed, if you like. It was up there with the best stadiums in England and possibly the bulk of them in Europe at that time. Now, what we've seen since then, particularly with the advent of all the money in the English Premiership and some of the other European leagues, is you're seeing clubs that previously couldn't hold a candle to, say, Celtic Park in terms of their stadiums, now putting some of that, extremely high revenue to use in terms of expanding their stadiums. And Tottenham, the stadium you were at last night, is a great example of that. But you've seen everybody from Everton building a new stadium, some in progress at the moment. The Emirates, stadium, Arsenal stadium, they're all fabulous stadiums. And I think the problem is that we've kind of stayed relatively static in terms of our stadium. The development around it is fantastic. Love the way the interest the stadium looks and everything now. But I think, it's maybe getting to the point where with the revenue we have to look at how can we get the biggest return on investment in terms of, separate from the first team and the team investment, but how can we make the fan experience better? And Jim, you've spoken a lot about your experience at the football, ability to see screens and things like that, the viewing areas, the general facilities that are maybe in need of a bit of an upgrade. I get that there's challenges and there's concerns about, well, if we do this, are we going to see meaningful return on investment? It'd be great to get 1,000 or 10,000 more fans in, but does that actually eventually pay back the big sum of money that's cashed out? As a fan, I would love to see it, but I do recognise that we're not in the same playing field as some of the big teams in England and certainly in wider Europe. But ultimately, if you want to grow as a club, you can't just grow in one or two areas. You have to try and grow the full infrastructure, and that includes what you've mentioned about the youth development, the women's team, which is I know there's differing views on people are a fan of the women's team or not, but the fact is it's a growing area of the sport, and it's starting to get a lot more exposure, not just in Britain but in Europe as well. So it's something that we should be, as what I would consider the top club in Scotland, we should be pioneering that in our country and really trying to invest in those areas. But you've spoken about the pathway for youth players, for youth development. It has to lead somewhere. At the moment, our pathway seems to lead to players hitting a bit of a stone ceiling and not being able to break through, and therefore they go elsewhere to try and break through. Now, you're looking for players to step up and show their potential, absolutely. But we have to give them the tools to do it. We have to give them the platform to show what they can do. Pathway has to lead somewhere, right? It cannot continue to lead to a dead end, as it seems to have done with players recently. And as I'm not putting all of that on the club. You're expecting the manager to be assessing the potential and making a decision. All these roles that Darren O'Dea and Steve McManus has been involved in the past, and your backroom staff that are involved in youth development. They've got to be able to make informed assessments on players. But surely to goodness, out of all the players that we're trying to progress through the academy and through youth football and into the B team, some of them must be showing the capability to step up into the first team. Otherwise, what's the point?
There's English clubs who have asked that very question. And
in terms of the stand thing, sorry, Paul, in terms of the stand thing, yes, we are risk averse, but there's risk averse and risk averse, because talking about it was a £70 million to build that. I mean, that could, if circumstances in the world change, that could cripple the club. So, I totally understand the risk averse nature of. I'd like to see a new stand, but I don't think we'll ever do it. I just think it's too much money. If it's $5 million, do it tomorrow. Not an issue, but if it is something like 70 million odd, I think that's just a huge risk. And we've seen what's happened in the past few years with COVID and stuff like that, and then the political situation in the world and what have you. So I understand risk averse up to a point. I'm happy to take a risk here and there. But if we were going to spend £70 million in a stand, and the payback might take us 9-10 years to pay it back, but it's just too risky, I think. And I think that's how the Celtic board will think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I agree with you, Jim, on that. And on the political side, I'm just looking forward to the aliens taking over, because they'll probably run the place a wee bit better. Just waiting for that day. But in terms of the stand, it's 1971 we built the main stand as it is now, Jim. You'll remember that. You'd been a season ticket for about 2 decades at that point. And then they put the new facial.
You can take your award and you can. Where the sun doesn't shine.
I'm jesting. And obviously they upgraded that in the centenary season with the new fascia. But the redevelopment that Fergus McCann ushered in through the share issue, that's now 30 years old. So we're talking about the main stand being ancient, but the rest of it is getting old as well.
Yes.
And you're right. I've heard figures 70, 80, but they're talking today 100. They were talking £100 million today.
I think also when you posted that video last night of the Spurs stadium inside, I mean, that is pretty much space age compared to Celtic Park. Although we love Celtic Park, you know, bits of the stadium are becoming a bit tired, but the atmosphere is still great. I mean, I wouldn't be looking to spend silly money in other parts of the stadium. It's going to be the south stand. What do you do with the south stand? If it's going to cost £100 million, I don't think it'll ever happen. Even if we were in the league down south, I'm not a big fan of that idea either. I mean, I think some sort of European league, fair enough. But anyway, that's my piece on that.
I think we worked it out one day on here, 70 or 80, and I'm talking, you know, figures on the back of a fag packet, and it would take 17 years on ticket sales and average revenue spend per fan every game, etc. 17 years to pay back the money. I mean, there's other ways. Obviously, you could sell the naming rights to the stadium. I know that would not be popular amongst a lot of fans, but who knows? It's one of the things at the moment. It's a hot topic, but I think the club, and Michael Nicholson answered the question to say that, you know, under different circumstances, talking about the environment that James mentioned earlier, if we were in a different environment, perhaps it would be a higher priority.
Also, I think it's a wee bit like paying transfer fees. How much do you go? If it was 5 million tomorrow, 10 million tomorrow, 15 million, 20, at what point do you say, I just, if it was maybe 30 million, 30 to 40 million, I think they might have done it. But once you go beyond that, I think it's not going to happen.
Yeah. And by the way, talking about atmosphere, everybody I spoke to in the stadium last night was saying that the atmosphere is not great. So that was interesting as well. The atmosphere is not great. I do believe that, you know, if it happens in my lifetime that the Celtic Stadium is evened off for everybody else with OCD, and that comes right up to the same level as the other three stands, the atmosphere would be unbelievable at Celtic Park. Right, I want to bring in some of the commenters before we talk a wee bit more about the Hearts game coming up tomorrow night. Of course, AJ stay in, the Christmas advert, and what Jim's been up to with his play. We want a wee update on that as well. So before we do any of that, some of the regulars are coming in. Paddy Lavery, going to need more shells for all those awards, Paul John. I think there's a few spare ones at Snake Mountain. There you go. And can I just say, obviously, I'm only doing there representing a Celtic State of Mind. And one of these years we'll all get down, you know, because it's one of the things with the travel and all the rest of it, and coming back up the roads, it's not always possible. But one of these years we will all go down. Ewan Boy Martin says, so looking forward to the game tomorrow night and hopefully see us winning well. I'm going to throw this one to yourself then, James. Tomorrow night's game, I know Hearts aren't doing so great this season. They've changed their manager already in the first few months of the campaign. They're sitting down there second bottom of the league, being propped up by their Edinburgh neighbours. But it's never an easy night at Tynecastle, is it?
Yeah, kind of regardless of whatever state Hearts are in, like the games between ourselves and them are just always pure chaos. It's either 4-0 Celtic or 4-3 Celtic, or there's red cards, penalties. Like it's just kind of their games that just kind of chaos seems to happen in. And I think Hearts have obviously improved. Even they lost their last two games to Heidenheim in the Conference League and then to Rangers. So kind of two pretty respectable sides, even though they have lost their last two games. But like they have improved under Critchley compared to Naismith. Like I think any managerial change from Stephen Naismith would have marked some improvement, but it is a different Hearts side than the one we face under Naismith. Like they'll obviously set up in a shape to kind of stop us playing and probably try hit us on the counter. So it'll be obviously a tough game like Tynecastle always is, but the form we're in after having that kind of week or two off in the international break, you would obviously fancy us and hopefully we can go and get the win ahead of the Bruges game on Wednesday.
Yes, I know, looking a wee bit further ahead to some of these Champions League games. This is the big topic of discussion last night, being in amongst English football fans, Chris. Luton Town to my left, Newcastle United to my right, was how well Celtic are doing in Europe. So it shows you how, you know, quickly that word spreads because we've got a couple of decent results. Obviously, I spoke to the Luton Town guys about Carter Vickers, and I spoke to the Newcastle guys about Eddie Howe. Yes, it was Eddie Howe. That was the topic of conversation.
Right.
Not looking too far ahead to Bruges. We'll have plenty of time to do that on the aftermath, I guess, of the Hearts game. Tomorrow night, 7:45 kick-off under the lights. It's a late kick-off and everything else at Tynecastle. There's not many tickets. That's another subject that was brought up today at the AGM. How do we line up? Because obviously all the players are getting back together today. Brendan Rodgers said that in his pre-match press conference earlier on. They're all going to come back together today, but there's going to be fatigue. There's going to be travel fatigue, particularly with the Japanese boys, I would suggest.
Yeah, myself and Quinny discussed some elements of that yesterday. Quinny was kind of of the view, well, we've got options, we can bring players in, but then the counterpoint to that is that you've really got a very strong, established kind of first choice 11 at the moment, which have been consistently playing at a high level. But that lineup does include players like Hatate, Maeda, Kyogo, who've travelled really far afield, albeit didn't get a huge amount of minutes for the national team. But you know, it's the sort of duration of travel and distance that they've had to travel. And I think it was mentioned, I saw it mentioned elsewhere, that the last time Maeda did that particular journey, when he came back, he actually looked quite leggy for him. Now, a leggy Maeda is probably still faster than 99% of the players in Scotland, but I think, again, these are players that are going to be so valuable over the course of the season that if we have the opportunity to maybe rest them, whether that's resting them after 60 minutes of the game or resting them from the start and giving guys like Luke McCowan, James Forrest, Yang, the much maligned Palma, etc., the opportunity to come in. I mean, that'll be down to the manager and what he thinks. But to James's point, I mean, it can be such a frenetic atmosphere at Tynecastle, and we've seen players like Yang kind of wilt under the pressure a little bit. We're not going to have a huge amount of our own supporters in there, which I do think our players feed off of, and it can be quite a hostile element. For me, I think it'd be more important that we try and retain some of the momentum we had prior to the international break, get our strongest possible 11 on there from the start, maybe get a few early goals, and then you've got the opportunity to, say, bring in a Luke McCowan, a Bernardo, maybe even a James Forrest. But I think, you look at players like Nicholas Kuhn, the form he's been on, he's a game changer. He's an absolute game changer, as he's proved so many times. And I think he's a player we'll rely on. Callum McGregor's the one luxury we've got because he's not had an international break as such. He's not had to go and play football. He's had a break during the international break, which is fantastic for a guy that we rely so heavily on. So, the international break's not hampered every player that we've got. We've got some really good options to come in. But for me, I think you stick with your most successful and your winning team, and then the fact we've got that quality and depth means we can call on that when required.
You're really pushing that Bumblebee talk, Chris, aren't you? You want to be involved in the old
I do.
marketing campaign.
I'm not forgiving you for not giving me the nod and giving Lawrence the nod. I mean, double denim, man. Come on.
Double denim and the Bumblebee hoops underneath. So before I come to you on the Hearts game, Jim, tell us a wee update on your play, because we know that the dates were rescheduled and some of the cast were unavailable, but there's been an announcement, I think, since the last time you were on, that you've got someone else involved.
Yeah, the wonderful Des McLean, comic genius. Yeah, and if you know the history, it's coming to the Webster's Theatre 3rd to the 5th of April. So the ideal Christmas stocking filler for every Celtic fan out there for the period of the late 80s to the early 90s. Which actually I was going to say something about that there, because what I was going to say about the game tomorrow night is the fact that I've said this a few times in the podcast. Still love football, but hate what it's become. 7:45 on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
500 Celtic fans at Tynecastle.
How many empty seats, Jim, do you think? Well,
I don't know, but basically, I thought I'd do a wee bit of research this morning, because even old guys can do research, basically. And the centenary season, which I think was your first season going to games, corresponding game at Tynecastle, 30,000 were there. Obviously, that was before the Taylor report. 30,000, of which must have been at least 7,000 Celtic fans had been at that game. A late Matt McGee equaliser. Football, real football. This tomorrow night, asking fans to go to a football match at 7:45 on Saturday night. It's shocking. It shouldn't be happening. Only 500 tickets. It's shocking. Really is bad. So now we rank 13-20 there. As far as the game's concerned, I that old football cliche about, win the battle, then play the football, as Chris alluded to there. First 15, 20 minutes, they'll be at the traps. I think it's important that our players don't give the referee a decision to make, because I think he'll make it. Tynecastle has been a bit of a kind of one of these grounds where we've given referees lots of decisions to make over the years, so don't do that tomorrow. I think Hearts are in a false position. I actually felt, of all the home games in the league this season, I thought they gave us the hardest game, even under Naismith. They looked pretty comfortable. It didn't look as if they break them down at all. We get the penalty, so I kind of like first 10, 15 minutes of the second half, and then Luke McCowan scores in the last minute. I thought they gave us the hardest game. Aberdeen, as I said before, they gave us about 10 minutes of trouble. The rest was the easy street. So I think they're in a false position. I saw the game at Ibrox a couple of weeks ago. They were the better team. They should have won the game, never make a point. They've got good players. They've got a manager in who's not bad as well. So I'm expecting a really tough game tomorrow night. I think Luke McCowan should play tomorrow night, because it's a game for people to roll their sleeves up. I think he might leave Engels out with the Wednesday night in mind. As Chris said, he played the strongest team. I think in that kind of atmosphere, something like Luke McCowan would be ideal. I think with Bruges Wednesday night and Ross County, without looking too far ahead, if you're going to rest players, Ross County at Celtic Park next weekend is the one. But I would go with the strongest team, but I think Luke McCowan makes the strongest team for tomorrow night.
That will be interesting to see that 11 coming out about an hour before kickoff. Now, you were talking, James, about the Hearts manager, and his record since coming in is played 7, won 3, drawn 1, and lost 3. So a slight improvement from Naismith, who I just felt had a decent enough squad. Kind of going back to what Jim was saying, decent squad, totally underutilised for me. Brown Warrior, you're in. Great to see you as always. If they are good enough, they are old enough. The likes of McStay and Aitken cut their teeth in a far more robust level of football.
Yeah, but it was easier then. That's the point we were making earlier. If you're Paul McStay, you're Roy Aitken, you're thinking, I've got a real chance of playing for Celtic. If you're the equivalent young guy in Scotland these days, have you got a chance of playing for Celtic? Not really.
It's one step from the reserve team to the first team back then, Jim. That was one of the big things. And they'd already been tested by the time they stepped into the first team, because they had played alongside a lot of the guys who were in the first team.
And that's when you talk about the B team league. And, if you compare the B team league to the reserve league back in the day, no comparison at all. No, sitting in the fifth kind of tier. There's one other point I wanted to bring up today. Am I surprised? Probably not. But there was a question around Mark Lowell. There was a question around Mark Lowell and his departure. And Peter Lowell had said that the guy asking the question had a highly personal blog that he ran, and that he wouldn't answer the question. He says that there was an unhealthy obsession with him, i.e. Peter Lowell, and his son Mark. And the question was passed on to Michael Nicholson to discuss. The club have said in the past, obviously, Mark Lowell was never sacked. He decided to leave the football club. Brendan Rodgers then came in to speak about how well he had worked whilst at Celtic, signing players. You were never always going to have a 100% success rate, and that Mark Lowell was hugely influential in bringing Ange Postecoglou to the football club. So Brendan Rodgers stood up for him. What I found interesting about it, guys, was Peter Lowell's response, basically saying, I know what your bloggers and your vloggers and all that are up to, and I know the kind of tone of certain sites, etc. And I found that interesting because, we were at an event last night. It was not a fan media event. It was a media event at Football Content Awards. As I say, a couple of the tables to my left were the overlap guys. Ian Wright wasn't there, unfortunately, nor was Roy Keane. Otherwise, I'd have gone over and annoyed them. And it just shows you how there's been a rise, obviously, in fan media channels to the point where they're being recognised, not always in a good way, Chris, by those in the higher echelons of Celtic Park.
No, absolutely. But I think, look, there's two schools of thought on this that I want to talk about. The first one is, look, if you're at the highest profile club in Scotland and one of the highest profile clubs in Britain, Europe, and the world, actually, I think you have to expect that you'll be under scrutiny from all channels, right? And I'm not saying that I endorse any abusive language towards people or their families, absolutely not, and certainly no reprisals like we're seeing against football officials at various clubs and various positions. So no, absolutely not. I think there's got to be a degree of certainly human understanding and professionalism amongst what's termed as fan media here, and I think that's something that we try and pride ourselves on at Acsom. But I think Peter Lawwell and Mark Lawwell as well, a lot of what they faced is based on information that they themselves control, right? I mean, Mark Lawwell, as far as we know, and as far as was communicated by the club, was one of the most senior figures in terms of recruitment at Celtic Football Club. And over a period of a couple of recruitment windows, the players that were signed for various sums of money did not make an impact on the pitch, right? And that's evidenced by the fact they were not getting played, they were in and out of the squad, results weren't great, take your pick. Now, in any position, if that's your part of your core role is to, identify players, recommend them to the manager, authorise the spending and bring them in. And I know that's a simplistic way of looking at it, right? So I do get that. But you judge them on results. And the fact is that over the course of 3 or 4 transfer windows with multiple millions of pounds spent, they didn't deliver. So you can make an assessment based on that. And that the club didn't give us any more information on that. Right, so you have to draw your conclusion based on the facts or the other perceived facts that's available. So that's it. So look, I'll never endorse any Celtic official, whether it be Peter Lawwell or otherwise, be subject to abuse or anything like that. But you're a senior member of a football club with the kind of following of Celtic. I'm sorry, expect to come under scrutiny when things aren't going well, in the same way that you expect to get credit when things are going great. Right, that's for me. That's the nature of the job. If I was fortunate enough to be in that sort of position, I would expect that, and that's from players to managers to coaching staff to officials in the back room. I mean, you want me to be brutal about it? Suck it up, mate. You're in the best job in the world, as far as I'm concerned. Holding all the power at Celtic Park. You can't deal with a little bit of criticism. I'm sorry, but I'll put this in for counterbalance. I'm delighted at the way our football club is situated in terms of how healthy we are financially. We've got a wonderful stadium, albeit we've spoken about, where we'd like to see improvements. We're doing great in Europe. We've finally seen investment in the club that's allowing us to do that. And we hope that the upward momentum continues. So, you know what? Peter and everyone else behind the bird, great. Good job, guys. Keep it going. So that's my
just quickly then. It was another strange answer. It's almost like playing the man, not the ball, type of thing. In that, what's your question? Here's my answer. Rather than saying, you don't like us. It's a bizarre thing to say.
Yeah, that was the big thing.
Just to follow on from Chris's point there, if you're in that role at Celtic Park and somebody's asked you a question, answer the question. You don't then say, well, I think you've got an agenda against us. Just, here's the answer. You may not like my answer, but here's my answer.
Yeah, I think Jim. Sorry, Paul John. I was just going to jump in. I think the one thing that really annoys, certainly myself as a fan, and I've seen that other people with a similar view, is that there seems to be almost an element of looking down on supporters, and not giving supporters credit enough to look, be transparent about what goes on at the club. Within reason. You don't have to tell us the complete ins and outs, but trust us with information. Let us know the challenges that you face as a club. Let us know, why you make decisions around investment. Let us know if you're tightening of the purse strings. Give us a little bit of information to work with, but don't deride us.
Even if you don't do all that, I mean, if you're Peter Lowe, you're asked a question about Mark Lowe, then you rhyme off some of the stats that you rhymed off there.
Yeah.
Ange Postecoglou loves him. Brendan Rodgers loves him. He signed that. He contributed to that. Next question. That's who you are. But to say, well, you don't like us.
You've got a vendetta.
I find that really strange. That's a strange answer.
That was the thing. And again, has Acsom fallen foul of that? Probably a little bit with regards to some of the criticism we've given, but it's never personal, as you said, Chris. No. It's called fan media for a reason, because we're all fans of the football club. Jim's been a fan for a lot longer than any of the rest of us.
Keep going, mate. Keep going.
So we're frustrated and we talk about things that but you know what? See if we're wrong, correct us. It's like you say. Yes. And one of the big points that was brought up by the Celtic Trust today was around the fan advisory board and whether or not that could be set up to actually have that fan engagement. So that if we're wrong and we're getting the wrong end of the stick, tell us. And you know what? We might even be able to share that information to people that tune into your channel or read your blog or whatever it is you decide to do.
Just another kind of old guy comment here is if you go back to the early 90s when Terry Cassidy was the chief executive, and that was part of something called Save Our Celts at the time. We have this meeting at Shelton, and there's a Q&A, and people are just rattling Cassidy, question. And everyone turned around and said, where did you hear that? It's in the Daily Record. Was it? Right? So that's where you got that from? That's wrong. So, bang, because, we don't get information firsthand. We get information secondhand quite a lot, and that's the point this makes, that we can only go by what we hear, and as long as we're civil in terms of how we answer the questions, there's nothing wrong with that. But as you say, there's a way to answer things.
Yeah.
I'm just looking for that letter. Remember the letter from Terry Cassidy that I had? You remember that?
Yeah.
We're talking about it. I'm just looking for that just while you are chatting, guys. Hopefully I can pull it up.
Paul John, I just want to comment a comment that's come up here because I just want to clarify this. So my boss came in and said, Acsom are always pretty fair, but I think to tell someone to suck it up when they're being abused is not good. I just want to clarify that point. I said it and I specified it. I do not condone any abuse of any Celtic official or their families, right? But what I meant by suck it up was to say, in that position, you are always going to be subject to scrutiny and criticism. The professional level criticism, I would agree, is fine. And I think that's something that people have to absorb. I did not mean to tell them to suck it up under abuse. So I just want to clarify that because that's a false statement.
Well, I think Peter Lawler has the right to not answer the question, but my kind of biggest concern would be like he's one of the smallest shareholders now. I've done a bit of research a while back, like when he was brought back in. He's not CEO anymore. When he was CEO, like I remember hearing that he didn't even attend AGMs. Like, so now he's obviously attending them now. He attended the one with Nicholson today. My question would be kind of what's the leadership structure look like now at the club? And I don't know if anyone asked that, but I know Nicholson's obviously CFO, but what is Law's position now in the club? He kind of obviously snuck in after we were kind of going really well with Ange. He kind of was brought back into the club, not announced on any social media sites. I would want to ask the question, what is his position at the club? And I don't know if anyone did ask that at the AGM, but it's an interesting question. Like,
it's a brilliant question, and it's a direct one that wasn't asked today. I know everybody else knows his position, but in terms of his job title, James, but the point you're making is what is his role? What does he do day to day, and where does he appear in the pecking order? Because I mean,
because I think he's the 5th or 6th biggest shareholder now. Like I think in the club, there's 4 or 5 guys with more shares in the club than him. So this guy just kind of thought, if you take away the history of Peter Law with Celtic, you're having the 6th biggest shareholder at the AGM. I just kind of was curious about that.
Yeah, that would have been a very, very good question, actually, rather than when's Rod Stewart going to invest in a football club, which was one of the questions, believe it or not, today. Yeah, I know. Here we go. Big Red says a couple of things, actually. He mentions the fact that the Coyle boys were at Dumbarton. I always thought Owen Coyle would have signed for Celtic. He was one of the guys I always thought would have signed for Celtic. Goal scorer back in the day. Get a Murdo MacLeod 11 versus Celtic. We spoke about, benefit game, charity game. Celtic could do that during an international charity week, an international break rather, and put a team together, a hybrid team, and make a few quid. Yeah, I'd be all over that.
Good idea.
Absolutely. Listen, thanks every single. And don't forget Steve McCahill, says Jay Conley, Jay Larkin. I remember Steve McCahill. We bought him from Dumbarton for about $100,000.
The 80s, yeah.
You remember him?
Yeah, 80s.
So, yeah, thanks every single person for getting involved today. It's been a quick turnaround. I didn't have a private jet. Someone suggested. There you go, the Flying Haggis. Did you use a private jet to go up? You know this, mate. I was up at 5 o'clock this morning. We purposely were in a hotel right next to the airport, jumped on a flight up the road with very, very little sleep. So hopefully I'll catch up at some point tonight. But tonight there will be This Is Acsom. And This Is Acsom with Chris Bumgard, who is a brilliant guest. We talk about MMA, but we also speak about his love of movies. It takes us on a nice wee tangent because Chris has a hobby of going to visit locations, and it's got him into a couple of pickles, which he tells us all about. Absolutely brilliant interview with a really, really good guy who wants to be given a bit back now that he's a successful MMA fighter, and he wants to get kids within his community. He wants to give them a premises and a facility that they can use, because I think it was a wee bit harder when he was younger. So great guy, big Celtic fan. Tune in. I want a prediction from you guys. Saturday night football. Starting with yourself, James. How's it going to go at Tynecastle tomorrow?
I think hopefully there isn't too many decisions to make. Like Jim said, hopefully the players don't give the ref too many decisions to kind of to go against us. But kind of going off previous meetings with Hearts, I'd probably expect a couple of goals, maybe a red card, hopefully on their side. I'd say maybe 3-1, hopefully. Just a win, though. I'll take just a win.
Just a win.
No
Absolutely.
red card.
Yeah, you're right. And again, VAR and all that was discussed today at the AGM. Check it out. There's a few of the blogs running all the big talking points. Chris, what about yourself? What's your prediction?
Well, I made a prediction yesterday and I'll stick with it. I'll go 3-0. I think our defence is playing so well. We've got a fantastic goalkeeper and we're taking in a lot of momentum to this game. So for me, 3-0.
3-0 Celtic. I'll take that. Jim?
Famous last words. I think it'll be a classic tomorrow night. I think there'll be tons of goals. 4-2.
4-2. I'd like to see that, as long as it's in our favour.
To the good guys, sorry, to the good guys. Just
to the good guys. Yeah. To the good guys. Listen, again, I've got to extend my thanks to everybody who supported us through thick and thin on a Celtic State of Mind. We're always looking to improve, but we are going to keep our content free of charge. I know that some of the structures of fan media means that they need to go behind a paywall. I totally get it. It's normal on fan media. We're trying to keep our content free. So if you do want to help us, the best way to do that is basically come along and watch one of our live events. That's probably the best way to come and help us. Tickets are available, John Collins, maybe a wee bit less than, or fewer rather than 25 tickets left. But we do have a few tickets also for the Centenary Boys in 4 weeks' time. Ticket links underneath the video. Thanks again. I'm going to go for a bit of a kip. Thank you to Chris, Jim and James for joining me on a Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.